Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the fifth night of the 2018 Kehillah Marine Park Dine and Learn. It's July 30th, 2018. Thank you, Moshe Holzer, for arranging it. Thank you to the Meiri family for sponsoring tonight's Dine and Learn. Le'ilui Nishmas, Dr. Shalom Meiri's mother, Miriam Bas Abba, Nishom Sherav and Aliyah. So I have to start with an apology. Last week I said that this week we would be continuing and talking more about annulling marriages. But in retrospect, I thought about it a little more, and I think we need to build up to it a little bit, and that will be next week. This week I think we should talk about some of the challenges of escaping Europe, Christian Europe, to get to a place where Jews can practice their religion in freedom, and some of the halachic implications of that and complications of that. So we'll talk about one family. For what we know, their names were Reuven and Shimon, two brothers, probably not their real names. Their story is so complicated that Maharshtam turned it into 6 different tshuvos. Wow. And additionally, not only the Maharshtam answered their questions, and so there's a spoiler alert, one of them escaped and was able to ask the questions. You'll find out who at the very end of the story. And not only the Maharshtam answered, but also the Mabit, who was in Sfas, answered their questions. And I think I mentioned one of the earlier weeks that the Mabit and the Rav Yosef Karo, the author of the Beis Yosef, the Shulchan Aruch, both were in Sfas at the same time and did not necessarily get along too well. So the Mabit's tshuva was not published by the Mabit, it was published by the Beis Yosef, by Rav Yosef Karo and his tshuvas. Avkas Rochel, Siman Pei is the Mabit's tshuva, and Siman Pei Aleph is Beis Yosef saying, he got it all wrong, here's the right answer. So we have 3 different answers to the questions that are going to arise in this family story. So Reuven, the older brother, gets married to Chana, and they settle in Portugal. It's after the time of the expulsion, and they are living as Christians, but they want to move to a place where they could live free, to Eretz Yisrael or to Turkey, where Turkey was controlled by Muslims, but the Jews were allowed to live free. So they wanted to, but they obviously couldn't have a Jewish wedding. That would have forced the Inquisition to get involved, and Khalila, we don't want that. But so the way it worked in Portugal is when a husband died, so his assets were divided. Half go to the wife, half go to the children. And if the husband wants to donate some to charity, some to his friends, some to whatever, he could do that, but could only come from 1/3 of the money that went to the children. So 1/6 of his assets was all he was allowed to give away. The rest was controlled to protect the family. So Reuven and Chana had a daughter named Sarah, and then Nebuch Reuven passed away. And by the way, when they got married, Reuven said explicitly, he said, "I am marrying you, having in mind that half of my money will go to you and half will go to our descendants, whatever." So Reuven had a brother Shimon who lived in Belgium, which in those days was Christian, and you were not allowed to live as a Jew there. And Shimon and Reuven were business partners. Shimon controlled, so Reuven had the assets, he sent it to Shimon, and Shimon did business with it. So when Reuven died, all his money were in Belgian bank accounts, so to speak. Shimon had all the money. And when Reuven died, on his deathbed, he said, "You should know half of my money that's in the account in my name really belongs to Shimon." So the question is, who has that money, right? Really, it's all in one big bank account, and they had some spreadsheet of whatever, a ledger of what belonged to whom. But how much did his wife inherit? Did Chana inherit? And how much did their daughter Sarah inherit? And how much did Shimon inherit? So that's part of the question. So Midin Torah, so how much does a wife inherit from her husband? 0. She gets the ksuba. The rest goes to the kids, and the kids are obligated to support their mother as much as needed. It's in Ksubas, and it's also in Bover Basra. So the question is, first of all, does Shimon get any of that money? Second of all, does Chana get, right, because on Reuven's deathbed he said Shimon owns half of it. Does Chana inherit half of her husband's estate, like Reuven said she would, and the law was? So the Maharshtam says yes. says on his deathbed, there's no kinyan to Shimon, that half the money belongs to Shimon. However, Reuben didn't make a kinyan. He didn't say, I am giving it to Shimon. What did he say? He said, you should know, it already belongs to Shimon. He's just explaining what happened. The fact is, half of it belongs to Shimon. So therefore, it says a mashdam, so half of it belongs to Shimon. Then, so if you look in source 1, this is from the Rambam, Hilchos Ishus, Perek Chav Gimel, Halacha Yud Beis. Hanose Stam, someone who gets married Stam with no conditions. Kosev, so he writes up a ksuba, Venosin ki minag medina. And you give to your wife whatever the minag in that place is. Vechein hi sheposkal hachnis, and also whatever she brings in, nosenis ki minag medina. Goes to the husband or it stays with her, whatever the minag medina is. Ukshetovo ligbos ksubasa, and when she comes to take a ksuba, magbin lo, she gets to take mashe b'ksubasa. What's in her ksuba? Kim minag medina. It all follows the minag medina. So what's the minag in Portugal at the time? Says the Maharsha, the minhag in Portugal at the time is the wife gets half the assets. So therefore, she gets half the assets. So the Mabed agrees with this. So he agrees. The brother Shimon gets 50%, Chana gets 25%, right, half of the remaining, and the other half goes to the daughter.
Harry. How did the Dina, the Malchus Dina, play an influence on what his opinion was? Because a lot of people don't hold by it.
So in this case, Dina de Malchus Dina doesn't apply straightforwardly, but it applies in setting a minhag medina. And so in America, the minhag medina, when it comes to inheritance, is not clear at all, because everybody writes their own will and does it their own way. But in Portugal, they weren't allowed. It was against the law to write a will contrary to how they only had 1/6 of their assets that they could control in their will. The rest was a clear, universal minhag practice there. But the Beis Yosef says, hold on a second. Wait a minute. Why are you talking about a ksuba? The Rambam is talking about a ksuba. Who gets a ksuba? A woman who's married, Kedas Moshe Yisrael, a Jewish wedding. They got married in a church in front of a priest. They're not married. So the Beis Yosef says, at most, or probably, she has a halacha of a pilegish, a concubine. Because they never got married al pi halacha. So Rashi ala Torah tells us many times, what's the difference between a pilegish and a wife? Between a concubine and a wife? A pilegish has no ksuba and a wife does. So the Rambam is only talking about a ksuba that Chana doesn't even get. And says the Beis Yosef, there's no kinyan to give Shimon half the money. There was no kinyan. So the fact that Reuven said it belongs to Shimon means nothing unless there is some sort of act of acquisition. Reuven can't just give away his money. If it was literally on the deathbed, so then you could say it would work. It's called a shchivmira, someone on their deathbed. But this was not, he had written up in his will beforehand, so it's not a shchivmira. There's no kinyan. So the Beis Yosef says all the money goes to the daughter. She inherits everything. Okay, I don't know what happened in reality. We'll have to find out at the end of the story who survived, who got out. So next part of the story. So Chana and Sarah decide they have no family left in Portugal, or the husband's not in Portugal. All their money is in Belgium with Shimon. They'll go to Belgium with Shimon, and he'll support them. So it doesn't matter who owns what money, he'll support them. So Chana and her sister Rivka and her daughter Sarah go to Belgium. So Baruch Hashem, Shimon and Rivka hit it off, and they got married. So two brothers married two sisters, chronologically different. Reuven wasn't alive anymore. But unfortunately, Shimon passed away also. They had a daughter, Dina, but Shimon passed away. So then you have the question again, what happens to his money? Does it go to his wife, Rivka? Does it go to their daughter, Dina? But either way, so the older sister, Chana, she took control of family finances, which is Shimon had said, I don't want my wife taking control of the family finances. You, my sister-in-law, you take control of the family finances. Good. So they go to Venice. Chana the whole time wants to get out of this Christian land so they don't have to live like Christians. She wants to live authentically like a Jew. So they go to Venice, and Rivka realizes what's going on, and she doesn't want to leave. She wants us to remain as a Christian. So she wants control of her husband's money. She wants control of her daughter's money. So she tells the authorities that her sister is trying to escape to be a Jew.
Oh my God.
This is what they had to live with in those days. So Chana is pretty smart and pretty good on her feet, and the way to get out of it is very simple. She starts paying bribes. She bribes everyone who's necessary, and she the authorities look the other way, and she's fine. But then the question is, who pays, out of whose money do those bribes come? Because remember, there's a spreadsheet on the side keeping track of it was one big pot of money, what belonged to whom. So does Chana have to lose because her sister went to the authorities? I neglected to mention when Shimon died, so even without anyone's involvement, the government realized there's some money there to be made. So one of the authorities said, I know Shimon, he was secretly a Jew, so I'm going to freeze all his money and I'm going to take it. So Chana got to action. She bribed him as well, or bribed whoever needed to be bribed, so they could free the money. And the question is, should that come from Shimon's estate, which was inherited by his wife or his daughter, or should Chana pay for it herself? So this is taka fascinating, this particular question. If you look at source 2, now Mashtam answers it based on the truth of the Rashba. Reuven v'Shimon hayudarim b'vayis echad. Reuven and Shimon, two other Reuven and Shimons a few hundred years before, were living in a house next door, yasamoch lebeis hahigamon, which was near the bishop or some sort of a clergyman, a Christian clergyman. They were his next door neighbor, and he did not like Jews. He didn't want, not in my backyard. He didn't want Jews living around him. Uvau Levi v'Yehuda. Okay, so they lived in tension. That happens. Neighbors don't have to like each other. But then Levi and Yehuda came to Reuven and Shimon's house, but also bias on that day, on that house, Bepurim. V'asus chok. They had a little too much to drink, and they started making jokes. The clergyman next door said, "V'amru ha'akum she'oso schok haya keneged dasam." He told the authorities that their jokes had been anti-Christian. Whether they were or not is not clear, but he interpreted it that way out of his own malicious interpretation. And not only did he tell the authorities on Reuven, Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda, the whole Jewish community was at risk. They were all at risk of a pogrom. So how in those days did you prevent a pogrom? Money. So the community had to pay off whoever they needed to pay off to avoid a pogrom. So the question was, I went to the Rashba, so the community members were pretty annoyed. So they wanted Reuven and Shimon, or Levi and Yehuda, someone should repay the community's coffers. If I'm the gabbai, and I struggle to put a Dine on the table, and then I have to pay another $10,000 to some police chief, I'm going to be annoyed. So they wanted Reuven and Shimon, or Levi and someone to pay back that $10,000, whatever it was. So they asked the Rashba, who's at fault? So the question, this is already part of the question. So they asked, maybe Reuven and Shimon, the original owners, it's not their fault. So some people want to say, Reuven v'Shimon garmu ha'hezek, they caused the damage. Because they moved next door to this guy who hated this anti-Semite. What are you doing moving next door to the anti-Semite? So even in the question of the Rashba, which the Rashba agrees with, Venirali, the Kavan, no. Just moving next door to an anti-Semite didn't cause anything. Made him unhappy. No, people are allowed to be unhappy. But what caused the whole problem? The schok, the Purim drunks, they caused the problem. So maybe Reuven and Shimon are totally potter.
Maybe they're responsible because it was their house and they allowed it in their house.
So the Rashba, on the question herself, they say Reuven and Shimon are not at fault. At least not enough at fault to have to pay. So in the end, the Rashba concludes that nobody's at fault.
Where's the Ma'aser Hazek?
What?
Where's the Ma'aser Hazek? We're making them another one.
You're assuming the conclusion. So the question is, someone caused this anti-Semite to create the problem, and the conclusion is exactly like you said. It's a garmi. It's so far removed. Not only are Reuven and Shimon not obligated, but even the Rashba says Levi and Yehuda do not have to pay anything because they're so far removed. There was they had no way. They didn't actually cause it. They might have pushed a little too far, but there was no definite cause and effect that it was going to happen. It was not guaranteed at all. It's very remote. It's no. Let's not go into Grama and Grami. So So says the Maharshdam, so the fact that Chana was born a Jew, that caused, and her brother-in-law was also born a Jew, they should be blamed for this greedy authority in Belgium who wanted to freeze their assets. That's so far removed that none of them are to blame. So Chana doesn't have to pay for it at all. If it was Shimon's estate that was frozen, so Shimon's estate should have to pay for it. Okay, so we're running over the time I had allotted for this. So in the end, what happened was Rivka stayed in Christian Europe. Chana, her daughter Sarah, and her niece Dina escaped. And they all got free. They were able to practice as Jews. And then once they're free and you're practicing as Jews, comes the next step where you start arguing in your family over money. So they argued in their family over money. I don't know what the conclusion was, but it sounds like they split it up. And Dina, I would guess, Dina inherited everything from her father's estate that they were able to get out. Chana inherited half from her husband, and Sarah inherited half from her father. I think that's what happened.
So the Malshin got money after all.
Rivka
Rivka
was the Malshin. She stayed in Christian
territory, whatever
Italy.
it was. But did she get any money?
She no. She might have gotten a fraction, meaning half of her husband's estate.
Right.
She probably did, I would guess.
And then did any of the penalties and the money that they bribed come out of her pocket?
Yes, a lot of it did.
That was determined by the Maharshal?
But that was all happening in Turkey. So it was really her daughter who lost out, the Dina who escaped, because they're not sending money back to Christian Italy. Then I presume, I don't have any information, but I presume it was all Rivka's daughter who had control of her mother's money, whatever was removed from Christian Europe. That's what I would assume would have happened. So my main point here in dealing with all this is, A, they're interesting questions in who owes what, but it's also getting out of Europe, Christian Europe was not a simple matter. And so another question that came up, this was also asked for the Maharshdam. This is Yardea Simon Kufsadi test. So a Jew managed to escape from Christian Europe, and he came and he was fully observant. He was Torah observant and 100%, used his Yiddish name. But the question was, when he communicated with people still in Spain, who he does business with, or his family's there, so if he uses his Jewish name in letters to his family, they could get in trouble. And if he's trying to do business with people, the business isn't going to work if he's calling himself Moshe. Should he call himself Pablo or something like that? So can he use his Christian name in correspondence that is being sent into Christian Europe? So the Maharshdam starts out saying, first of all, definitely it's proper to use a Jewish name, especially someone in that situation. You want to distance yourself as much as possible from your life as a Christian. I mean, you didn't choose to have life as a Christian, but you want to move on in your life. Use a Jewish name, that's the best thing. But the question was serious. What does he do in those situations when he wants to write a letter? So the Maharshdam points out this Gemara in Gittin. It's really a brisa. That's source number 3. Gittin habayim im dinas hayam. So Gittin that are sent to Israel from Chutz La'aretz, ve'edim chasumim aleihem, and you have witnesses signed on it, and you don't know who these witnesses are. They're just names. They're names on a piece of paper. Even though the names signed on the get are not Jewish, ksherin is still a kosher get. Why? Most Jews outside of Eretz Yisrael, they have non-Jewish names. In the times of the Brisa, Jews outside of the land of Israel had non-Jewish names. Most of them did. So the Gemara is not saying that's mutter. It's not saying it's aser. I would have thought if that's really a problem, they would have said, they were punished for that or something. But there's no judgment whatsoever. So the Maharshdam infers from that there's nothing wrong with using a non-Jewish name. He's not recommending it. He's saying there's nothing wrong with it. So, but maybe in this case, using a Christian name implies that you are a Christian, and you're intentionally trying to imply that you're a Christian by using a Christian name. So for that, you go to the Gemara in Nedarim. So you have to be careful with this Gemara, because you'll see. Okay, Amar Rava said, Shari le'litzurba merabanan. A Talmud Chacham is allowed, lemeimar, to say, Avda denura ana. I am a servant of the fire. So in Bavel, the non-Jews, they engaged in this Zoroastrianism, this religion Zoroastrianism, and part of that was worshiping fire. So you're allowed to say, I worship fire, implying that you're a Zoroastrian, that you're not Jewish, that you're doing avodah zarah. So my time, why is it allowed? Lavruche arye minei, in order to avoid paying taxes, Kalmar. So you have to be careful, because in those days, it's clear, there was an anti-Semitic tax. There was a special extra tax on Jews, and that's unfair, that's discriminatory, so that you're allowed to avoid. The regular tax you have to pay. That's a different Gemara. Here, if it's a discriminatory tax, so you're allowed to avoid it, but the interesting thing is you're allowed to avoid it by pretending you're an Oved Avodah Zarah. So they didn't wait to read the Gemara. So Rashi says, not your Oved Avodah Zarah, it's your a servant, meaning you're a slave to the idol. And the other interpretation is that you're a servant to the priest. But either way, you're implying, because Jews don't take those jobs, you're implying that you're a non-Jew somehow in service of an Avodah Zarah. But the key is, you're not actually saying, I'm not Jewish. And the way the Nimuki Yosef understands this is that you can't actually say, I am not Jewish. That's not allowed. But you're allowed to say confusing things that he might interpret to mean as I'm not Jewish, but you don't mean that at all. So if you look in the Shulchan Aruch, so when the Maharshdam was actually writing it maybe 10 or 20 years before the Shulchan Aruch was published, but either way, look at the Shulchan Aruch. So he's not quoting this, but I am. Asr la'adam, source 5. Asr la'adam lo mashu oved kochavim kadei shelo yahargu. You're never allowed to say, I am not Jewish, even if it'll save your life. It is Yeharig Val Yavar, because you're basically saying that you worship idols, which is not allowed. Aval, however, im kadei shelo yakiruhu, but if you want to avoid detection, shehu Yehudi, that you're Jewish, mishanim abusho b'shas gzera, you're allowed to dress like a non-Jew. So that's mutter kevan she'eino omer shu ovid kochavim. That's allowed because you're not specifically saying I am not Jewish. You're allowed to do everything up to the point of saying it. So there was a shaila in the Holocaust. Can you show papers? You're not saying it, but you're showing papers that say that you're a Christian. So that was actually machlokas a poskim. So Rav Menashe Klein, who was a Holocaust survivor, he said it was allowed, and Rav Oshri, thinking of his son's name, Rav Oshri, who was a Flatbush, but his father from the Lower East Side, but who was a Holocaust survivor. So he was asked shilas during the Holocaust, and he said you're not allowed to show papers that say that you're a Christian, because it's just like you're saying it yourself. I mean, I should not, no judgment here. Baruch Hashem, I've never had to go through those institutions, and I know people did different things. There's no judgment here. Also, with the Christians in the times of these persecutions, there's no judgment implied whatsoever. We're just trying to understand the halacha. So says the Ramah, moving out of Philovish Kilayim, even though you're not allowed to say that you're an idol worshiper, you're not Jewish, you're allowed to say something that can be interpreted in two different ways. And that's what we were just saying. And the non-Jew will interpret it, he'll think you're saying I'm not Jewish. But you're saying something totally different. You say, I'm a servant of the fire. You mean the Eish of the Torah. You worship HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now, no Zoroastrian no one in Bavel is going to know that you mean that. But that's what you mean, and he'll misinterpret it. That's his problem. And if you could trick them, you could do any kind of trick, as long as you don't actually say the words that I'm not Jewish. So therefore, says the Maharshdam, this Jew who escaped, who wants to communicate with his relatives or with his business partners in Christian Europe, is allowed to use his non-Jewish name. He's allowed to do anything except for saying, I am a Christian. Okay, so moving on to the next case. This is Taka. Okay, so the Radach, we talked about him last week. Rav David Cohen of Corfu, the island off of Greece in Italy. He was asked this shiloh. And at first it's surprising, it's a little shocking. Someone asked him, his father, he escaped Christian Europe, his father was still in there and died. Can he say Kaddish for his father? So what's the Shiloh? In those days, only one person said Kaddish at a time. And so many people there had escaped and refused to pretend to be Christian. They refused to convert. Many of them had relatives who chose to be martyrs, who died by the sword rather than giving into this conversion. And they might not be able to say Kaddish because this guy's saying Kaddish for his father. So it clearly created a certain amount of animosity and people were upset. You just imagine the shul, and he starts saying Kaddish instead of the other guy he's in Shloshim, the guy's in Yud Beis Chodesh, and he can't say Kaddish because this guy in Shloshim is saying Kaddish.
I don't understand. Because when they didn't have any Kaddishim, I guess, at a time?
It depends how many mourners you have. So if there are, let's say, 6 Kaddishes in Shachris, or maybe in those days they had 4 Kaddishes in Shachris, and some of them are said by the Shaliach Tzibur. So if you have 1 Shaliach Tzibur and you have 2 Avelim, so then there's not enough Kaddishes to go around.
Why is this a Shiloh about escaping from Christian Europe? It's a Shiloh under any circumstance, when only one person says Kaddish.
Right, but so the circumstances that raised the question were in those days. So if we're talking about any other time, let's say 200 years ago, when only one person said Kaddish at a time, or if you go to Washington Heights in Broyers, where only one person says Kaddish at a time. And by the way, everybody saying Kaddish at the same time, it's very clear we adopted that from the Sephardim. But apparently 500 years ago, even Sephardim weren't doing that, or at least some Sephardim.
Hasidim would do it also. Was
200 years ago, even the Hasidim didn't do it. Yeah, So here's why. Because if it was just all available for someone who normal, a regular Jew who just never passed away, so then you have rules of who has precedence and how you split it up. But in this case, they didn't even want to apply the rules because he might win out, and someone whose father submitted to martyrdom rather than convert would lose his privilege, lose the Kaddish. So the question is, does he have an obligation, and should they even allow him to say Kaddish? Because his father was a Russia. He converted to Christianity. So there are 2 stages to this. The second stage, which I won't go into, is he's saying his father was not a Russia. He says the true story of his father was that his father was trying to escape. So what does it take to escape Christian Europe? You know, how hard could it be? You just get to a port city, you get on a boat, the boat lands. There are no immigration walls. There are no immigration officers. You get off the boat, and you find a place to live, and you find a job. How hard could it be? Well, you know what? It's actually hard, because you have to get enough money to travel to the port city. Then you have to have enough money to buy passage on the boat, and then you can get off, and then you get off, find the nearest shul, and you'll say, please help me, and then people will help you. The Jews are Rahmanim, but first you have to get on the boat. This father, he had enough to get to the port city. He gets to the port city, and then he gets robbed, and he doesn't have enough money to buy passage. So he goes back to his city, earns more money, gets there, buys passage, but then he's killed by thieves.
Right.
So that's not a Russia. That's a guy who's trying to escape, but he can't. It was not so easy to escape Christian Europe. So to his Shiloh, but even let's say his father was a Russia. So the Mashram says, even the Radach says, so why do we say Kaddish at all? So the Rishonim quote a midrash that Rabbi Akiva, someone came to him in a dream and said, I passed away and I'm suffering in the Olam Haba, and the suffering won't end. So Rabbi Akiva woke up and he went to this person's son and taught him how to say Kaddish. The son said Kaddish, and then the person came back to Rabbi Akiva in a dream saying, thank you, that solved it. So said the Radach, out of Kibud Av, we say Kaddish. It's a form of Kibud Av. And how do we know you could get kapara, you could get some sort of atonement for someone who passed away by saying Kaddish? So it's the Gemara. What do we say in Kiddushin? It says, what do you say over a parent who passed away in the past year? You say Haren, within that year you say Hareni kaparas mishkavo. I should be an atonement for their coffin. So we see that a son or a child can bring kapara. So every time you say Kaddish, it's some sort of a kapara for the deceased. So the question is, should he be doing a kapara for someone who was a Russia? In this case, he wasn't a Russia, but let's say he was. So if you look in source 6, Gemara in Chagiga, Tesvav Amud Beis, Kinach Nafshe de Acher. When Acher, Elisha ben Abuya, who became an Apikoros when he passed away, Amri Lo Meidan Li Dine V'Lo Amad Asi. Don't punish him. Don't bring him to Olam Haba. We're not touching him because if we punish him, then we have to reward him afterwards. We don't want to reward him. That's what they said in Shemayim. So then, Mishum, we don't want to punish him, Mishum de Asak Baraisa, because he learned Torah. V'Lo Amad Asi. Lacy, but we also mishum dechata. We don't want to bring him to Olam Haba because he was such a big. He did so many averos. So Mina Shamayim, they said we're not doing anything with him. Amar Rabbi Meir. So Rabbi Meir said, "Mutav deli Dine v'Lacy la'almad asi." Better you should punish him, and then bring him to the world to come and give him his reward.
Who's his comment?
Yes, Rabbi Meir was his student.
That's why he made that statement.
So Rabbi Meir says, "Almost when I die, ve'ela ashan mikivro." And there should be smoke coming up from his kever, from his grave, showing that he's being punished, which means that after the punishment is done, he'll go to Olam Haba, and Acher would also get his reward. Kinach nafshe de Rabbi Meir, when Rabbi Meir passed away, Sali Kutra mikivrei de Acher. And that's what happened. There was smoke coming up from his grave, from Acher's grave. So we see that Rabbi Meir, who was his student, was able to give some atonement, some kapara to his Rebbe. Which, by the way, is a proof that you can say Kaddish for someone who's not your parent. Because Rebbe Meir did the equivalent of a Kaddish for his Rebbe, who wasn't his parent. So then, source 7 is even more clear. It's talking about Chizkiyahu Melech. Chizkiyahu was a righteous king, but his father, Achaz, was incredibly wicked. So when Achaz died, so Chizkiyahu Melech Yehuda, Shegira Asmos Aviv Amita Shachavalim. He dragged his father's body on ropes throughout the streets, doesn't say where. So if a eulogy is mishum di'ikara dechayehu, is for the honor of the people who are living, my taima. So why would he drag? Why the eulogy that he did would be to drag the body through the streets? That's not showing so much covet to the people who were there who came to the eulogy. So the tehavi le kapara lavua. So it should be a kapara for his father, that his bones should be dragged. That should be a kapara for all his many, many sins. Okay, so we'll put that aside because we're over the time. So we see, number one, you could bring a kapara to someone even after they're dead. And number two, even for Rasha, even for Elisha ben Abuya Acher, and even for Achaz, who was a wicked king, you could still bring a kapara. So therefore he said, this son can also say Kaddish. He's a chiyuv to say Kaddish, even though his father was a Rasha. And then it goes on to say, but Chas v'shalom to say about such a man who was a Rasha, Nebuch, he was trapped. So what I wanted to get across tonight was just, number one, how to get out of Europe, is that everybody tried. It was Nebuch, they were trapped, and it was very difficult, and many interesting shilohs arose because of that, and through those shilohs and the answers, we could see how difficult life was and how terrible it was. We should never see such things again. And Mr. Shem, next week, we'll talk about the implications of when a wife gets out, but a husband doesn't.